After saving a lion cub, a man finds himself surrounded by the pride, and what they do next is absolutely mind-blowing. The muddy waters of the Saran River churned around Ethan Miller's chest as he battled the fierce current. Clinging desperately to his shoulders was a tiny, drowning lion cub. Just minutes earlier, the 34-year-old wildlife photographer had been setting up his gear on the riverbank when he saw something that would change his life forever. A tiny cub tumbling into the swollen river, instantly swept away by floodwaters that had risen overnight from heavy rains upstream. Ethan had been documenting wildlife in Tanzania's Serengeti for 8 years, but he had never broken the golden rule of nature photography: never interfere with natural processes. Until now, the cub, no more than 4 months old, had been playing too close to the water's edge when the soft earth crumbled beneath his paws. His terrified squeals as he was dragged downstream by the powerful current pierced right through Ethan's professional detachment. Without a second thought, Ethan dropped his camera and plunged into the dangerous river. "I couldn't just watch him drown," Ethan later told investigators. "Every instinct I had as a human being just overrode my training as a wildlife photographer." The rescue nearly cost Ethan his life. The Saran River during flood season is treacherous, filled with hidden debris and unpredictable currents that have claimed the lives of countless animals and several humans over the years. As Ethan fought to reach the struggling cub, a submerged log slammed into his left shoulder, nearly knocking him out cold. Only his sheer determination to save the young lion kept him focused as he finally managed to grab the exhausted animal. The cub, weak from swallowing river water and absolutely panicked from the trauma, immediately wrapped his small paws around Ethan's neck and held on with surprising strength. Ethan could feel the animal's tiny heart hammering rapidly against his chest as he began the dangerous journey back to shore, fighting against a current that seemed dead set on dragging them both downstream toward the crocodile-infested pools below. What Ethan didn't realize as he struggled through the muddy water was that he was being watched. On the riverbank, hidden among the acacia trees, 5 adult lionesses had been tracking the sound of their missing cub's distress calls. The pride had been searching frantically for the youngster, following his scent trail right to the river's edge, just in time to witness Ethan's incredible rescue attempt. As Ethan finally reached the shallower water near the bank, exhausted and gasping for breath, he looked up to see a sight that made his blood run cold. The entire pride was there, not just the 5 lionesses, but also a massive male lion with a dark mane, all standing motionless in a semicircle around the water's edge. Their amber eyes were fixed on him and the cub he carried. Ethan's mind raced through his options, but he quickly realized he had none. He was trapped in chest-deep water, holding a lion cub, with 6 full-grown lions blocking his path to safety. Any sudden movement could trigger an attack that would end his life in seconds. The largest lioness, clearly the pride's matriarch, took a step closer to the water. Ethan held his breath, expecting the worst. Lions are fiercely protective of their young, and here he was, a human stranger holding one of their cubs. Everything he knew about lion behavior told him this situation would end in tragedy. But something extraordinary was about to happen. Something that would challenge everything scientists understood about lion cognition and social behavior. The matriarch's eyes weren't filled with aggression or threat. Instead, Ethan detected something he had never seen in a wild predator's gaze during 8 years of wildlife photography: recognition and what appeared to be pure gratitude. The cub in Ethan's arms began mewing softly, calling to his pride. The sound seemed to break the tense standoff, and what followed would be captured on Ethan's waterproof action camera, which had been recording automatically throughout the entire incident. The matriarch stepped into the shallow water, her massive paws creating ripples as she moved closer to Ethan. Every muscle in his body tensed, preparing for an attack that never came. Instead, the lioness stopped just 3 feet away and did something that defied every law of predator behavior Ethan had studied. She lowered her head in what could only be described as a bow. The gesture lasted several seconds, during which the other pride members remained completely still, as if witnessing a ceremony of profound significance. When the matriarch raised her head, she made direct eye contact with Ethan, not the threatening stare of a predator assessing prey, but the steady gaze of acknowledgement between equals. The cub in Ethan's arms grew more active, reaching toward his mother with tiny paws while making soft chirping sounds. The matriarch responded with gentle chuffing vocalizations, the same sounds lionesses use to communicate with their cubs during nursing and grooming. "It's okay, little one," Ethan whispered to the cub. his voice barely audible above the sound of the rushing water. "Your family is here." As if responding to his words, the matriarch took another step closer. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs, but something in the lioness's demeanor told him he wasn't in danger. Her approach was careful, deliberate, and completely non-threatening. What happened next would be analyzed by animal behaviorists around the world for years to come. The matriarch gently extended her massive head toward Ethan, close enough that he could feel her warm breath on his face. For several moments, she simply studied him, her intelligent amber eyes seeming to assess not just his physical presence, but something deeper, his intentions, his character, his role in saving her cub. Then, she did something unprecedented in recorded lion behavior. The matriarch began to groom Ethan. Her rough tongue made contact with his forehead, the same nurturing behavior she would show to members of her own pride. The gesture was unmistakable. She was accepting him, temporarily, as part of her family unit. Ethan remained perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe, as this apex predator showed him a level of trust that contradicted everything he thought he knew about wild animals. The grooming lasted only 30 seconds, but the message was crystal clear to every member of the pride. Ethan was not a threat. He was not prey. He was the human who had risked his life to save one of their own. The other lionesses began to move closer, their body language relaxed rather than aggressive. The massive male lion, who had been maintaining a watchful distance, padded to the water's edge and lowered himself into a resting position, a clear signal that he considered the situation peaceful. Ethan carefully began moving toward the shore, still carrying the cub. The pride parted to create a clear path for him, their behavior more reminiscent of an honor guard than predators surrounding prey. As he reached the muddy bank, Ethan slowly knelt and placed the cub on solid ground. The reunion was immediate and emotional. The matriarch rushed to her offspring, nuzzling him thoroughly, checking for injuries and purring with relief. The other lionesses gathered around, each taking turns to sniff and examine the rescued cub. The male lion approached last, his massive head lowering to gently touch the youngster with his nose. Ethan remained kneeling on the riverbank, water dripping from his clothes, watching this intimate family moment unfold. He should have been terrified, surrounded by 6 of Africa's most dangerous predators. Instead, he felt honored to witness something few humans had ever seen: the genuine emotional bonds within a lion pride. Dr. Lena Petrova, a wildlife biologist who later reviewed Ethan's footage, was stunned by what she observed. The grooming behavior exhibited by the matriarch is typically reserved for pride members, she explained. For a wild lioness to extend this gesture to a human suggests a level of cognitive recognition and gratitude that challenges our fundamental understanding of feline social intelligence. As the pride settled around their recovered cub, Ethan began to slowly back away, hoping to give them space and avoid disrupting this precious family moment. But the lions had other plans. As Ethan began to retreat, the matriarch looked up from her cub and made a sound he had never heard before in 8 years of documenting African wildlife. It wasn't a roar or growl, but a gentle rumbling call that seemed almost conversational. The other pride members immediately responded, rising to their feet and positioning themselves in a formation that took Ethan's breath away. The lions arranged themselves in 2 parallel lines, creating a clear pathway from where Ethan stood to the acacia tree, where his photography equipment waited. It was an escort formation, an honor guard protecting his safe passage away from the river. "Impossible," Ethan whispered, his voice caught by the waterproof microphone still recording every moment. They're seeing me safely out." The matriarch took the lead position on Ethan's right side, while the massive male lion moved to his left. The 4 other lionesses flanked them, maintaining perfect spacing as they began a slow, ceremonial walk away from the riverbank. Ethan found himself in the center of this extraordinary procession, surrounded by over 1,500 pounds of apex predators who were treating him like an honored guest rather than potential prey. The rescued cub, now recovered enough to walk, trotted alongside his mother, occasionally looking up at Ethan with what appeared to be curiosity rather than fear. Every few steps, the youngster would brush against Ethan's leg, a gesture of familiarity that left Ethan speechless. As they reached Ethan's equipment, the pride came to a halt. The matriarch approached Ethan one final time, her massive head tilting slightly as she studied his face. Then, in a gesture that would be replayed millions of times on social media, She gently pressed her forehead against his, the same greeting behavior lions use with trusted pride members. "Thank you," Ethan whispered, not caring if the lions could understand his word. "Thank you for trusting me." The matriarch stepped back and released a soft chuff, a sound of contentment and farewell. One by one, each member of the pride approached Ethan, briefly touching him with their noses or rubbing against his legs. Even the massive male lion participated, gently bumping Ethan's shoulder with his enormous head before moving away. The rescued cub was the last to say goodbye. The youngster sat directly in front of Ethan, tilted his tiny head upward, and released a small mew that sounded remarkably like a thank you. Ethan reached down and gently stroked the cub's head one final time, both of them seeming to understand that this moment would never be repeated. As the pride began to move away, heading toward the shade of distant trees for their afternoon rest, Ethan stood alone by his equipment, soaking wet and emotionally overwhelmed by what had just transpired. His action camera had captured every second of the unprecedented encounter. The footage would later be authenticated by wildlife experts, analyzed by animal behaviorists, and featured in documentaries around the world. Dr. Jane Goodall herself would call it one of the most remarkable displays of interspecies communication and gratitude ever recorded. But for Ethan, the technical analysis mattered less than the profound truth he had experienced firsthand. In that muddy river, surrounded by wild lions who should have seen him as a threat, he had witnessed something that science was only beginning to understand: the capacity for genuine gratitude and recognition across species barriers. The rescued cub grew to full adulthood under the protection of his pride, and Ethan continued his photography work in the Serengeti. On several occasions over the following months, he encountered the same pride during his shoots. Each time, the matriarch would acknowledge him with a gentle chuff, and the now-grown lion he had saved would approach his vehicle without fear, sometimes resting in the shade it provided. Local Maasai guides began calling Ethan Keto's protector, the man who had been adopted, however briefly, into a lion pride. Tourism operators started offering Ethan Miller tours, hoping to recreate the magic of his encounter, though none ever came close to replicating the extraordinary trust and gratitude he had experienced. Dr. Petrova established the Miller's Serengeti Research Foundation to study the cognitive and emotional capabilities demonstrated by the pride during the rescue. Ethan's experience proves that the boundaries between human and animal consciousness are far more fluid than we ever imagined. She wrote in her groundbreaking paper, "What we witnessed wasn't just animal behavior. It was a demonstration of values we consider uniquely human: gratitude, honor, and the recognition of moral debt." For Ethan Miller, who had started that day simply hoping to photograph wildlife, the encounter became a life-changing reminder that compassion is a universal language, spoken and understood by creatures we're only beginning to truly know.